All right, hello everybody, and welcome to the August 3rd, 2021 iteration of the SIG Windows Kubernetes community meeting. As always, these meetings are recorded and uploaded to YouTube, so please be sure to adhere to the CNCF Code of Conduct. Okay, we can get started. See if there's some more intros. I see a couple of people who are either new or haven't seen in a while on the call. If anybody would like to, just say hi, share what you're working on or anything, please go ahead or let me know. We can go into the announcements. I don't really see anything for the announcements here today. 1.22 should be releasing this week, I believe tomorrow. So that's great. Thanks everybody for all the hard work you put in for making that release happen and moving everything forward. So we're starting up on the 123 development real soon. Does anybody have anything else before we dive into the agenda that they'd like to either announce or just mention here? All right, does not look like it. So we can go right into the agenda. I think the first issue was something that a follow-up from last week that Aravind was pretty involved in. So maybe I will skip that one and see if Aravind just joins a little bit late. And
yeah, sorry, he's not going to be here today.
Oh, okay. So yeah, we can go over this week. We have some updates from the Microsoft side about this. So for everybody who is new to this issue, I'll try to summarize what's going on here. But if anybody has more, can do a better job, feel free to interrupt me. But during some testing, Aravind and other folks at Red Hat found that if you have local container users in the container, if you start that same container and you target that local container user in two separate pods, that those two containers can access each other's projected volumes, which is not how it's supposed. I think that this was uncovered by some changes for how to lock down the projected volume ACLs on Linux, and the question was, can we do something similar on Windows, or what do we do here? And so there was some investigations that were happening a while ago, kind of internal to Microsoft, to see what we could do, if anything, at the OS layer, or if we needed or what we need to do here. Brendan or Muzz, do you want to kind of summarize things, or should I go ahead and share what the findings were?
Yeah, I can help summarize. So yeah, basically, when the disconnect here comes from just the differences in the architecture between Windows and Linux, and the differences between file permissions and user types in Windows and Linux. So the suggestion here that we had is, instead of assigning specific user permissions to files, or assigning specific user permissions like what is being done in Linux, the code running in the container should assign the users in the container to a set of well-known groups, so that users across different container workloads can just limit access based on these well-known groups. It's not a perfect solution. It's just kind of like a workaround that exists and works today. To actually implement a full feature or full change, a solution that works in the same way that Linux does, it would require kind of a fundamental change to the way Windows containers work in general, and we just need to continue investigating to see whether or not that's actually worth it for this scenario, or whether or not the workaround works for people.
Yeah, so I think following up on last week, I think that we should, I think that there was a question raised, should we update docs with a warning, just describing this behavior? And I think since we don't have a kind of a definitive way of fixing this yet, I think we probably should update the docs somewhere.
Yep.
To update this and also follow up. I think also in our like kind of internal investigations, we like anything that we change at the OS layer will probably take, you know, many months to come out. That's just the nature of some of these Windows Server issues. And fixes. There may be things that we can do in the kubelet to, you know, manipulate the host to create those groups and wire things up. We'll continue some investigations with that, but for now, I think this is probably the behavior that we can expect. So we should just, so we're going to want to document this and
Yep.
just let people know.
Yeah, I think the answer at the moment is definitely documentation, you know, especially while we're doing an investigation. I think what we're going to be doing is updating some of the MSDN pages on Windows containers alongside possibly some Kubernetes documentation.
I'll fill in the notes after that. Yep. Does anybody have any questions about this or for anybody? Like Brendan?
So what changes are we going to make in the kubelet? Are we going to say that projected volumes are not going to be supported in Windows, or just it's going to be a docs change saying that this will be a problem if you have Windows nodes in the mix?
So I think at least the plan right now is to update the docs to say more or less what you just said, hey, if you have Windows nodes in the mix, this may, you may see this behavior. Any kubelet changes I think would be still kind of exploratory to see if we can harden this a little bit by having the kubelet set up those well-known groups on the host machine to and pass that information along to the container start to, I think, better solve this issue or solve this issue more akin to how it works on Linux. But that's just, it would be experimental or exploratory work right now.
Okay.
So right now it breaks if you do set these because it does the CMOD to change the ownership. Is that something we should explore removing since it's a current limitation so that folks can apply usernames, or do we want to leave it as it is and then do this exploration to see if we can solve it in a better way?
I don't have I guess I don't have enough data to see what, or to make a decision on that yet. I'm curious, I guess folks on this call how often are people running with run as username with local container users? Is this something that functionality that people kind of want to work even with known limitations? Is this functionality that people would rather see blocked because of this potential data leak? I guess I'll leave it up to, or we'll leave it up to some discussion. Do you have an opinion on this, James?
I guess knowing that it's a limitation, I tend towards to unblock the scenario, but I would want to get like Avran's opinion and some other folks who have also run into this, because I think they, at least in OpenShift, they seem to run into this quite a bit.
Yeah, I can talk about the OpenShift side. Yeah, so what we had to do was implement a patch to skip the chown if it's, or yeah, skip the chown for Windows, because we have an emission controller that's causing these bad settings to occur for our Windows pods.
So is that, I'm guessing, would you like to see that patch upstreamed and then remove your patch?
I think that other people will definitely run into this. So it might make sense to do that.
Okay.
It is a little hacky. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was a hack to get us going.
Okay,
I can follow up on Slack with that.
Yeah, there's I think in the issue, there's a long thread that was started maybe 5-6 weeks ago about this issue that might be a good place to post on in Slack about it. Just bump that thread.
Yeah, maybe we should do some exploratory to figure out if we can use this user group kind of workaround and see if that's a feasible option. If that's a feasible option, move forward with that to unlock, and then because I think that would be the better path forward if it does work. Otherwise, I would say we probably want to just remove the check and make sure it's well documented.
Okay. Sounds good. My machine's being kind of slow, so I'll update the notes afterwards with everything we just discussed. All right. Anything else about this, or should we move on to the next agenda topic? Okay. Next is I wanted to bring up a discussion about the proposal that Ravi had going about how to identify Windows pods for during the API server admission time. And one of the, well, this is a work in progress for the implementation, or this is the issue. Here's the draft. So for some background here, during 122, the replacement for pod security policy went into alpha. And at the time, there was an open question about how do we identify Windows pods so that we can add Windows specific policies and also prevent Linux specific policies from rejecting Windows pods. During that, there was a lot, or during those discussions, there was I think it was kind of deferred to SIG Windows to figure out a way to identify the Windows pods, and Ravi's been working on a proposal revolving around runtime classes. So I've been following this this enhancement proposal, and it seems like, or my take on it is that everybody who's involved is okay with runtime classes, thinks that's the right thing, right way forward. The questions now are just a little bit about specific behaviors and actions, which we can definitely sort out kind of as we're doing the implementation, especially since this will progress through the feature stages. Does anybody have any, I wanted, since I think this is the way that things are leaning, I'd encourage everybody to take a look at this and make sure that this will work for everybody's scenarios or not, break or block any critical use cases here. Ravi, do you have anything you wanted to say about this, or comments about how this is going?
Yeah, so I think I have some updates that I need to give about this. Jordan has been reviewing this PR like last week and this week. There were a couple of points that he brought up. The first one, and both of them are like sort of points that we have stressed earlier. One is related to blocking the users from creating pods which just have node selector and tolerations. And this is what I was thinking initially, and I think Mark, James, I think Arvind and rest of the folks had some concerns if this would fly well with the community. And Jordan brought up the same point. So one thing that I'm thinking about now that we have agreed upon saying that we can use node selector even at the kubelet level to deny the admission of pods, I think I'm leaning towards having that backward compatibility in place. So it's a trade-off. And the trade-off is between breaking users versus how to do things correctly, in the sense that we know that runtime classes can be created only by admins, and they only have privileges to add the node selectors or tolerations. And rejecting the pods earlier in the distributed system is perhaps where I would lean towards, in the sense that if we know that it's an issue, let's reject it at the API server level rather than rejecting at the container runtime level, which we are doing now. And the middle ground is perhaps at the kubelet level. So I think I can retract on that, considering that most of the people are already using the node selector plus tolerations, and we are going to use kubelet to reject the admission instead of doing it at the container runtime level. I think it is sort of okay, unless you have other opinions. That is number one. Number two is how are we going to deal with higher level workload controllers is another point that Jordan brought up. So the runtime classes at a high level would mutate the pod objects only, like they do not touch the higher level controllers. For example, a daemon set or a deployment controller which has a pod template. The runtime class admission plugin, which actually mutates the pod, is not going to work on those higher level controller or workload objects. So Jordan has given a scenario where this could fail. For example, if the pod security admission plugin looks at the deployment or a daemon set object, and it just has a runtime class, because by the time of validation, which is where this pod security admission plugin comes into picture, by that time, we wanted to have the validation based on node selector. And the node selector is actually applied by the pod, the runtime class admission plugin. So since the runtime class admission plugin is not going to touch the workload templates, by the time we reach the pod security admission plugin, while validating, the workload pod template would not have those node selectors or tolerations. So that is going to cause a problem, is what Jordan says. I've given a couple of ways through which we can solve the problem, but Jordan is sort of not convinced using both the approaches. One approach that I've mentioned is, can we mutate those objects in the runtime class admission plugin? And he told it's going to be complicated. We have done that in the past in OpenShift, and we noticed that it is sort of complicated. So I agree with him on that part. The second part is having the pod security admission plugin query the runtime classes and then see if it is actually, if the workload template is actually using a Windows runtime class or not. So Jordan is also against that because he wants to keep the validating admission plugin stateless. So meaning he does not want any other object to be used. But in a way, we are having a static configuration to exclude certain runtime classes in the pod security admission plugin. So I do not know if having the admission, if having the runtime classes queried dynamically instead of having a static configuration is going to be that bad. That is where I'm sort of what do you call, having discussion with Jordan. So those two are the contention points, and I believe I'm fine with the first one, where we are still going to allow users to provide tolerations and node selector and kubelet rejecting based on the node selector. But the second part is something where I think I'm waiting for inputs from Jordan. And if you guys have any inputs, please put it on the comments. I hope I'm clear till now. If not, I can try explaining it again.
Yeah, the one thing that I've been thinking of this whole time is like there are like so many, pod specs or even like sample files out there that do just use node selectors to target OS. So I think having that almost like fallback to still allow it with taints and tolerations would probably be good. Like you mentioned, it's a trade-off between, convenience and backwards compatibility versus correctness and security. So I think there's always a balance between those. But I think I'd be okay with the suggestion also.
Yeah, just to add to that point, I think this also gives downstream distributions a way to do it in the sense that like we are not being prescriptive in the community, but if the downstream distributions would still like to use the node selector to reject, they can write a webhook or something to be more prescriptive is what I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm. And then having those checks in the kubelet, I think, can give a better, error message or better experience than just the runtime checks. So I think the earlier that we can fail and the more information that we can expose to the users in failure cases, the better. So
yeah, like ideally it would have been better if we can reject it at the API server level itself, but I think we have been supporting it, so I'm fine doing that.
Yeah, and then for the second point, I think we're going to just want to keep working with Liggett or Jordan here about this. He's kind of the subject matter expert for a lot of these in Kubernetes kind of writ large. And then I personally don't have much experience with this, so anybody from Red Hat who's already experimented with all of this is probably like, well, kind of just use your learnings to do what hopefully is the right decision. But yes, I think again, this can be quite complicated. So I'll ask kind of anybody who's interested to take a look, comment, see all the comments, see what the discussions are happening, see what the trade-offs are for each approach here.
Yeah, the other thing that I will also do is I'll set up a meeting, like say if we cannot reach a conclusion in the on the GitHub PR, I think I'll set up a meeting with Jordan and SIG folks and then invite the community. If anyone is interested, please please feel free to join that meeting and then we can discuss there.
Yeah, that would be good. And I think it is good that this was started when it was started, because I think now folks like Jordan have the time to review it, whereas if we waited a couple weeks, I could see this kind of just missing, not having bandwidth for reviewers. So thank you for driving this early, Ravi.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks a lot. That's all I have for the updates, unless anyone have any other questions or comments.
No, I think we'll continue to discuss this at the next couple of meetings. And then, like you mentioned, might be good to just say, put a date on and say, if we don't have consensus, let's set up another breakout meeting.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Jay, I think your item next is about the burrito server.
Yeah, that. And then I know Friedrich isn't going to make it. And I'm pretty heads down on some stuff, and Amim is here, and I know he's heads down on some kube proxy stuff. So I was thinking probably not a good day for the SIG Windows pairing stuff. At least not a good day for me to drive it, really. So if someone else wants to drive it, or if we want to cancel today, I think that would be that was my thought. But in addition to that, yeah, this is the burrito commit, which is so when you're building Windows nodes, as you always need to do, right? With images, because we can't redistribute Windows. We have this concept of putting all the Windows binaries into a HTTP server so that image builder can just build the operating system image easily from that. So we do this downstream, and we talked a few meetings ago about doing this upstream, and everyone was in agreement. And so Pere's taken our downstream and sort of made an upstream friendly version of it, that isn't specific to VMware or anything. So I'm pretty happy with it. I haven't tested it, but I was just talking to him offline and asked him if he had any opinions, because I'm not sure where to put this. And I feel like DevTools would be a good place to carry it, but I don't mind putting it in SIG Windows Tools either. I just feel like SIG Windows Tools might be not use, like in the DevTools, we could probably use it directly. And so it would be a part of our whole automated thing. And we're probably pretty close to being able to run the DevTools in CI as well now. And so I feel like that might be a more natural home for it, but I'm okay putting this in SIG Windows Tools. I feel though like SIG Windows Tools is kind of in a weird state right now, so I hate to dump more stuff into it. But if folks don't care, then me and Perry will just make a call on it. But if folks have strong opinions, now's the time to let us know.
So do we have a version of this in Image Builder?
Yeah, so there's a first pass at a very simple HTTP server in Image Builder itself. I was hesitant. James, let me know if this is a good idea to leave it in Image Builder. I'm down for it. I just feel like getting something like this with as much code as it is into Image Builder might also be dumping something in there that we aren't 100% sure how long it's going to live there and all that. But if you think Image Builder is a good place for it, I'm all for leaving it in there and just bumping it. This is a much more sophisticated version of that, though, you know, so it's like a lot of code.
Yeah, I was just looking at it now. Yeah, it's much more than what we had in Image Builder. So I just wanted to make sure that, like, if we're making improvements, like, we don't have
having two places. So we should,
yeah.
you know, it's a good point. It's like we need to get rid of the one in Image Builder or put this in Image Builder. What do you think? Like, what does anybody care? I don't have a strong opinion. I'm just trying to think of what's the place where it's gonna be the most natural fit.
I think that if we're going to kind of remove the image builder, or the version is from image builder, and you know, essentially try and reference it in image builder or some of the cluster API projects, I think that the SIG Windows tools repository just might be a better fit, just purely based on the naming of the repository, and I think there'd be less eyebrows raised. But yes, SIG Windows tools has been in a weird state for a couple of many releases now. The other advantage of SIG Windows tools, even though this is small, is we do have like a Docker Hub account set up and have CI that publishes container images to that. That wouldn't be hard to set up in Windows Dev Tools as well, but it is already set up in SIG Windows Tools, so you can get CI jobs to build and publish the image.
Well, then let's just push it in, because I don't care. So, and I'm sure Perry's going to be fine with it. So, okay, cool.
James or Claudio, do you have any comments before we just push it in based on what I said? Or anybody really?
Sorry, I was trying to look into Jay's issue.
Oh, no worries.
Couldn't pay too much attention, sorry.
No.
Can we leave feedback on this PR?
Yes.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So this is where it's going to stay, right? That's what I just heard. It's going to stay in here, and you're going to convert this whip to real PR, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my suggestion. But if anybody opposes, like, we can reevaluate.
I just want to make sure if I make comments, they don't just get closed and moved.
Yeah, I mean,
I think we should just make sure we clean up Image Builder and repoint it over here so that we don't have two duplications of the work.
Okay. I agree. So I will put a semaphore issue in Image Builder right now that says move, graduate, because it's in the hack directory, right? The original one I made. So I'll make a graduate hack burrito to SIG Windows tools. Cool. I'm making that issue right now.
Is there an example of how you use a burrito, like when it comes across when you're doing Image Builder?
Yeah, I think there's a TGIK episode where we used Image Builder live and showed people how to build Windows images that you could look at. That would the other example, whenever you run Image Builder with Windows, you kind of pointed at some HTTP endpoints, and right now, if you grep around in the code, it hard codes those endpoints to the GCR.io Kubernetes releases, I think. And so, kind of by default, it's already using a already using a burrito. It's just the burrito is GCR.io, right? It's just pulling those images down from an S3 endpoint that's maintained upstream, right?
They're actually container images with tar. It's the original tar with the executables inside of it, right? It's actually using, like, I could use the Go container registry to pull those down if I wanted to, right?
No, the only difference between the burrito and the S3 is what you just mentioned, right? Which is that S3 is the burrito, right? I mean, you don't need a container to run it as an HTTP server because GCR is an HTTP server essentially, right?
So-
the burrito basically is a Docker container, and the Docker container is executable, but the only thing it does is serve up all the binaries for you.
I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is like, I mean, I've kind of talked to you a little bit for what we're doing for RK2, right? I'm sorry, by the way, I'll turn this camera on too. So what we're talking about what we're doing for RK2, we ended up making all those binaries into a scratch image, and we just pushed those up into Docker. And I'm just proposing why, if that's how that's working with the Linux side of things, like why do we need this HTTP server if we could just do some packaging and just push those up into a Docker image? And push them into a Docker registry. That sounds like how that is what I'm understanding. That is how the image builder stuff works for the Linux side, right?
So image builder, there's a couple different ways you can get your binaries. One is via URL. So you just say URL, here's where kubelet lives, and go make a query and download it. The other way it works is via RPM packages for Linux or apt-get or whatever it is your distro uses, and it will go do the same thing. And then it also works with tar images for some of the containers that are images for the Linux side. For Windows, there aren't images for a lot of these things, so we basically just go to a URL and download those URL the components. So GCR, dl.k8s.download, and you download the kubelet and kubeproxy. And so in those, it's hard. The default is to just go to dl.k8s.io and download those components. But you can swap in, your own URL path that you want for those things. And so that's what this burrito is for, is you just swap out that URL and it will go and get them from your own components. So you may have signed versions of all those components.
I see.
In our specific case, we in DevTools, right, Luther, like we'll patch kubeproxy or hack it up and try to see if it works or not. And so in that case, what we do right now is we then share that file into the kubelet, into the Windows node as like a shared file using Vagrant. And that makes our Vagrant developer tools much more coupled to Vagrant than they need to be, right?
Right.
So being able to just have, so it actually supports the image builder use case that James talked about, which is where a vendor wants to, but it also supports that developer use case also, where we want to be able to like people without yeah.
I guess I'm not making myself clear. I think my only concern is you're building a whole nother HTTP server for HTTP storage for a tar file when there's already Docker registries and things like this where you could just double up the use case. Does that make sense? People are already going to have registries. So if you could just build an image, put it in there and have it. I'm just saying that's how we did it. We really liked it. So that's all.
People will, but we literally don't.
Fair enough.
Right? Like
there's
like
also that answer.
In these two scenarios, like a customer that's running, for example, a Kubernetes product, like from day one, and they haven't ever run a Docker container before, like those people exist, right? And it's like they want to get the product up and running, and the first thing they need to do is build a Windows OVA, and it's like, how are they going to do that? Like we haven't solved that internally here at, what I mean? Like we do publish things, but it's like, you've got customers in air-gapped environments, and not every customer runs a registry. But yeah, I mean, for the happy path, you're right. Like for the happy path and image builder, just download from gcr.io, right? Like who cares, right? But it's more of a downstream thing, that it's a downstream problem that a lot of us have, and it hits air-gapped customers, but it's also an upstream problem for developers who aren't running their own Docker registry locally or anything.
We see, I mean, every air gap customer has their own registry, and we always make mirror scripts to push crap in, and I don't know. I just have never seen it. But we also have an RK too. We also do. We have runtime. We have like runtime air gapped tar files that we then dump in as well. I don't know. That it's also a lot of stuff going on inside of that project. Whatever, just talking it out. I think my only concern when I saw this PR was, why do you need an HTTP storage service that the registry already provides? That was my thought, and you've pretty much answered that. I mean, I don't really have a leg to stand on, so.
Yeah, it feels weird. I also feel weird about it. It just,
because you're also you're going into a new structure too. You got a new YAML structure. It says this is this is an example YAML. This is how you do it. When we just did the same thing with Docker files, and we just had run go curl this thing, put it in, and be done with it, right? So I don't know. It's 6 one way, half dozen the other, but it just seems weird to have a whole new structure where people already understand Docker files, and there's already HTTP registry stuff that's already there. That's all.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I also agree. It feels weird, and I haven't come up with another idea on how to generically solve this problem that's portable.
I wonder, do we have like a SIG Windows dev tools version of the burrito? Like I could see what Luther was describing and just having like a container image that has everything being useful for SIG Windows tools that Image Builder can pull from for kind of people who just want to get up and get a cluster up and running. But maybe the SIG Windows dev tools is where it's a little bit different, and you can point it at, you know, tip of tree artifacts for everything for this.
But I would see it. So for me, I wouldn't, if I was going to build, if I had a Docker registry, then we're going to put an image and we're going to put it up there into, say, some Cube hub account. And that's the get started one, right? And then I'm a developer and I want to make my own. I would just do a Luther / Cube image, whatever burrito, and I would push my own, and then I would just point to that, right? So I would still have Docker available to me. Sorry, Docker Hub available to me. I still have a registry. And if I wanted to host my own locally, I could. Like, you could just have that as your storage and be done. That's my argument.
It's actually non-trivial to host your own Docker registry inside of a hypervisor when you don't know what the hypervisor is. Like, it's actually harder than you might think, right? Like, we tell customers to run their own Harbor registry. I mean, Harbor's sort of was supposed to be the solution to this also, like the upstream solution to this also. I mean, I think that you're going to move. I think what I would like to do eventually with this is use Image Pack, which was sort of designed to solve this problem by taking an arbitrary group of files and putting them into an image. But yeah, it's strange to me that there's so many things that solve this part of this problem, but there's nothing that solves the whole problem in the way that we need it solved for Windows. Like, it's really annoying. But if you actually dig into it, there's actually no actual solution to this specific problem that
maybe I missed
generic.
what the problem is for Windows specifically.
It's the generic problem of how you build and manage Windows images for Kubernetes binaries, from Kubernetes binaries.
Okay.
How does Microsoft deal with this? How does
So we rebuild everything from source and sign it all, and then host them on a URL. So you can go download this like a kubelet binary that's signed by Microsoft. It's at I forget the exact website, but yeah. So we just rehost them and we put them on store. It's a storage account, so it's basically a website. It's just like GCR. We basically mirror the GCR endpoints, but we just build and sign everything from source.
Yeah, but then we build golden images for the VMs that get deployed as part of the cluster, and then we do cache a bunch of those. Like any versions that are still supported for like the different components, containerd, the Kubernetes binaries and everything, those get cached on the golden image. So then at no provisioning, it pulls it out of there and clears the cache. So we don't
Okay.
really solve it with container images. It's on the VHD that gets deployed to as part of like the VM instances in Azure, at least for AKS. That's not how it works for CAPC yet.
Okay, I see. Yeah. That
Yeah, well,
sounds
for CAPC, we build a VHD per Kubernetes version, and so then those versions are cached on the VHD.
Oh,
Or
okay.
during node provisioning for dev scenarios, like you can specify the URLs to a lot of like exact URLs to a lot of these binaries. But if you're in like a no egress situation, if you pick the wrong one, your provisioning will fail. Like if it's not on the VHD, too bad.
Yeah, one way that we use ours is in the air gap scenario, we actually run image builder in a container. So we take image builder, we run it in a pod, and then we run this alongside that pod so that the image builder pod can directly run and then on loop back, pull down the bits that it needs, which means that we can easily patch images that way by just putting a new binary in the container. And then image builder will directly, since it's running in a container and it's writing, if you run on vSphere, then image builder will directly like write the image as an OVA into vCenter for you, right? So we have a very container specific user story on our end, but we also are going to publish Windows binaries to our own Harbor VMware Harbor registries as well. But we're still for CI and for air gapped installations, we still want to be able to build the images that way. But anyways, yeah, it's a good point, Luther. I wish there was I wish there was a way to just rely on registries for everything, but it's
I think it also helps in the dev cycle, right? So like say if I have to patch, I have to push it to a registry and then download it and then use it. Instead, I can just update the patched binary, put it in the HTTP server and then use it to be served. So I think that's like even now we do both in OpenShift. I mean, not for Windows components, but some of them, some of the core control plane components, which are Linux containers. It's so much easier to build that locally and then test those changes than make those changes, push it to a registry, and then use Docker or another runtime to test those changes. So that's one advantage that I can think of.
Yeah, it used to be Docker Hub was free. Now it's not free anymore, right? I think that's one of the big things that's really
and
changed.
It's also rate limited. And
it's
some of the Windows manifests, like some of the registries, they do not support Windows manifests. So that's another problem.
What did you say? They don't support what? Windows what?
The Windows manifest, like say if you have a Windows manifest, I mean, for us, all the control plane components, they do not run as Windows containers. So all the Windows components on the node, they do not run as containers, right? So it's sort of easier. But say if we go to the privileged container support and say if we have manifests for them, an image manifest, not every container registry is going to.
I see. I guess let's just say for context on what our use case is. Yeah, so you do have to run those processes on the Windows host. We're pulling them down in a burrito that's an image, and then we're untarring those executables on the host and then executing them, right? So we're basically just using it as a tar GZ storage, an HTTP star GZ storage. So correct. Sorry, I just want to be clear. What we're doing is we're not bringing in Windows containers and we're not running Windows containers. There's no host privilege containers. We're just using it for transport.
And to add to that, we're not pulling a Windows container per se.
scratch Linux container.
Yeah, scratch Linux container with the binaries in it that we
But-
then do some stuff with, that we then pull down and extract those out.
Right.
So we're basically
Oh.
just zipping it up in a container format so we can transport it around with a registry.
Yeah, so this is image pack. The image pack folks, before we made this PR, we begged them to let us run to put HTTP functionality in there, and then you would have the best of both worlds. But the image pack folks said they didn't want to do that. Because the idea would be that you could, like pack everything in a container, and then the container itself has an endpoint. And then if people wanted to do what you're doing, which is just pull the thing down, unzip it, and copy a file, they could do it, but they could also just serve it on an HTTP endpoint. But the only open source tool that is really sort of ideal for what you're talking about that I know of at least is image pack. And the image pack folks want that tool to just do one thing and nothing else. So if somebody wants to do a startup and make like $100 million, like make provide support for an HTTP service that can serve some files up, because I haven't found one yet.
All right, sounds like we're still, I guess, don't quite have consensus here, but I think are hovering around similar solutions.
Well, I mean, we have two solutions, right? Like there's that solution, and then, what we do is actually shipped and live in a product now. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I mean, we're using it, and the RK2 has been using it. That's what they've done from the believe. So, it works for the use case that we're using it, but there's the use cases that it doesn't, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think this is,
Go ahead.
how do you distribute your binaries? And every vendor is going to maybe have a different solution. The most basic is via an HTTP server. And then I think this particularly solves, like, if you're using an HTTP server on the baseline, and you're doing it in an offline mode or a air-gapped scenario, this enables you to get up really quickly. But you could potentially solve it with other solutions, kind of the way that Jamie and Ross have proposed as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds like, okay, so but notwithstanding that, it sounds like folks are okay with it being in tools and don't really think it's a good fit for dev tools. I kind of agree with that. So I'm just I put a semaphore in there to close right now it lives in image builder. So I put a semaphore in there to kill that off. And once we move it over, and are folks okay with skipping the pairing today? Or does somebody else want to lead it?
I'm okay skipping. I think I've got to go pretty soon anyway.
Cool. Ameem is joining the Windows effort, by the way. He's worked a lot in SIG network stuff with us. And so just wanted to introduce Ameem to everybody and let folks know he's working on hardening the Calico stuff in the dev environments. And yesterday I pushed up a change to split the Calico node installation into 2 phases. And I've talked to the Calico folks and they're willing to take that upstream. So if somebody's looking for a quick PR to get involved with Calico Windows upstream on the Calico front, feel free to reach out to me and I'll point you all at the issue, or I'll just put the issue in Slack right now.
Yeah, so hi, nice to meet you. And I hope to work and cool stuff here.
Awesome, welcome, and thanks for joining
Thanks.
our community meeting. Cool. All right, I think we're quite over time now, so I think I'm gonna wrap the meeting up and we can continue discussions and everything next week. So thank you everybody for joining. Have a good day and week and everything. All right.
Cool.
Bye.
See y'all.
Okay, bye.